Good morning and welcome to a special edition of Metra Home Theater Tech Tips. I am Brett McCall.
I'm Adam Rogers.
And today what we're going to do is go over a little bit of the transitioning from HDMI to 2.0 to HDMI 2.1. Now, as much as we don't like PowerPoints, Adam has created a very good one that's going to be a very helpful tool in moving you toward the future with HDMI 2.1.
That's
now,
right.
At this point, I'm effectively going to turn it over to Adam and then answer questions as they come along. So Adam, to you, sir.
Okay, yeah, so we'll just kind of dive right in. This is actually a presentation that I did just about a couple weeks ago while I was up in Chicago. We did a little bit of a training on HDMI 2.1 as well as the 8K environment that we have coming to meet us now. So what we wanted to do was we realized that, especially with everything that's going on right now, a lot of guys are probably sitting at home or, have some free time and whatnot. So we decided, you know what, we need to get this information out there, and now's a perfect time to do it. So this is kind of like a condensed version of that. I had to fill about 4 hours last time, so we have like 30 minutes
by the way, this
today.
is part one
Yeah.
of 2 parts. Today we're going to get you a basic understanding. The same time next week on Monday, we're going to get deeper into 2.1, how it works, and how you can use it to your financial advantage.
Wednesday, not Monday. Wednesday.
Wednesday?
Yep, Wednesday,
okay.
not Monday. So there we go. Okay, anyways, we'll go ahead and dive right in. We'll go ahead and hit this button
here. That's a week
here.
Wednesday.
Yes. Okay. So what you guys should see on your screen right now, we should be seeing the presentation. What we have now is kind of understanding the change to HDMI 2.0 when we moved into 2.0. So what we have, the biggest thing that we went from the early HDMI stuff into the 2.0 stuff, we just added features and we added more bandwidth requirements. So with 2.0, of course, that was our HDMI 4K signal content where we could actually get real 4K at 60 frames per second.
HDR and deep color.
Right. So you'll see on your screen we've got our 18 gig, little graph there to show you everything going up to it. One of the biggest things, of course, that we had with that, like Brent just said, was HDR, deep color, different features like that. They had 3D capabilities, of course, and that's going to continue on even into the future. But
sure,
who's actually using 3D? And one thing to say, guys, as well. Ask questions while you're on here. Thank you for checking in with us. Definitely ask some questions as we move forward with it. We do have the chat for YouTube open. So as you guys have a question, go ahead and post your question to it.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely kick it up to us while we're talking about that.
By the way, we do have a giveaway this week.
We do.
We do have a giveaway this week, and I believe what we're going to give away
Okay.
is a HDMI surge protector.
Surge protector. Oh, wonderful. Yep.
In fact, hold on just a second here.
Oop. Watch your step. There you go.
If you'll switch back, there he is.
Oh, yeah, there you are.
Boy, this is weird.
Yeah. There you go.
This is the HDMI surge protector. Guys, just in case you're wondering why this looks so strange, is we're looking mirror image of ourselves on the TV, and this is hard to...
Well, you are used to normally looking in a mirror for yourself, and I know you walk around with your beauty mirror all the time.
Well, yes,
anyways,
can't you?
Yes, of course, yes.
But this
understood.
is odd.
Yes. So, anyways.
So back to the PowerPoint.
Yeah. So we'll be giving that away today.
The best question will get an HDMI surge protector. So please send your questions in.
Right. And you can ask questions if you're signed in as anonymous, even if you're not signed in onto Google. You can ask questions. So definitely do that while you're there. So, anyways, back to the presentation. Here we are. Okay. So everyone's pretty well familiar with what's going on with the 2.0 world. The biggest thing to get across with this is the requirements of bandwidth limiting us to 18 gigs. Now, one of the biggest problems that we get, and this used to be the case with, say, Apple TVs, Xbox Ones, where we're also an issue with the Xbox One X, where you could actually get past, Oppos had the capability as well, where you could get past the HDMI bandwidth limit of 18 gigs. So you were trying to do 4K 60 frames per second. You wanted 444
and 10 or 12-bit color.
Yep, 10 or 12-bit color. And so at that point, you actually increase well past the 18 gigabit capabilities. So let's see if we can go ahead and switch this over here. And that's one of them. I'm actually going to jump ahead to this one right here. So just to kind of give you an idea, when you're looking at 4K, and we'll keep HDR out of it for right now, but when you're looking at 4K, you've got 3840 by 2160 at 60 frames per second at 10-bit 420 is 11.14. But as soon as you jump that 420 up to 444, we're now up to 22.28 gigs. We're well past, what's that, 4 gigs higher, gigabits higher?
Well, you're doubling the bandwidth.
Well, yes, we're doubling the bandwidth, but the point is that we're now 4 gigabits higher than what our limit is of 18 gigs.
Well, actually a little bit more than that, but yes.
Yes.
Now, one of the things he mentioned is 420 and 444. We will get to a very detailed explanation of that in a couple of minutes, but just hold those numbers in your head, because that is very important, not just for today, but where we're going with 2.1.
Yeah, exactly. So hold on to that information for sure. So we're going to back up here real quick, and we want to talk about, Brent, actually, I'm going to let you talk about this. This is the 8-bit to 10-bit difference.
The biggest change through the history of HDMI up to 4K was the ability to get into deep color. What deep color does for you is remove banding in the video picture. So if you're looking at a sky, you'll see defined edges in the different shades of blue. Now, traditionally, we have been 8-bit for a long time. Now, 8-bit color, 16.7 million, is something we've all known from the VGA days.
Right.
Now, this is how we've watched television for the past 35 years. 10-bit color, which was announced under the 1.3 rules but not applied, we went from 16.7 million colors to over 1 billion colors. Now, this sounds like a lot and possibly unnecessary, but let's take a look at the two shirts we're both wearing. We're wearing black. Now, if it was just one shade of black, there would be no depth, no detail, no effective 3D. What you see is light reflections, shadows, wrinkles, dust particles. All that adds to what you're seeing in the background. So if you look at a standard black shirt like mine or Adam's, what you're seeing is hundreds of thousands of different shades of black. So if you've only got 16.7 million colors, you start having to blend things together and average them out. So instead of it being a number like 2.1, we're just going to call it 2.
Right.
And averaging is wonderful for fast, simple math, but it's not accurate or honest with colors.
Right.
This is where color depth plays a big part of 2.0.
So when you're looking at this here, when he's talking about the color depth and whatnot, you can see that one thing that we really wanted to get across is even in the 2.0 HDMI world, when you're looking at 8-bit versus 10-bit color, the amount of space that's necessary, bandwidth that's necessary, when you look at the 1080p 8-bit color, like Brent said, we're looking at 49,766,400 color information for the entire panel at one moment. Yeah, bits of information at one moment. Now, when we jump over to the 4K 8-bit color, you'll see that number greatly increases. We're doing 199 million bits of information per moment, any moment in time.
Any frame,
any
not
frame.
moment, any
Thank
frame.
You, yes. Yeah, exactly. So with that information, if we then increase that to a 10-bit color, you'll notice 4K, just 2-bit, I just broke it down to 2-bit of additional color, is the same amount of information as what a single frame of 1080p 8-bit is when you increase that to 4K. And the reason for that is, of course, is we're now increasing the amount of pixels 4 times. So this is really important as we move into the 2.1 world, because again, we're now doubling again the number of pixels. Pardon me, we're
bits.
Yeah, well, the number of bits, but we're doubling the just one layer for it. We're going from 4K to 8K, but we're not just doubling it.
We're
quadrupling it.
Right.
So
now,
we're increasing that by a
bringing up
lot.
a point, he talks about bandwidth. Go ahead, switch to. When you're looking at bandwidth, people think of speed, how fast the data is moving. That is very much incorrect. It's not how fast the individual data is moving, it's how many bits of data can arrive at any point in time.
Right.
So think about this like a highway. You got 1080p as one lane, cars are moving down 60 miles an hour. And as long as that car gets to that point on time, life is good. We're going to increase our color depth, so then we need 2 lanes, or 4 lanes, or 6 lanes, or 8 lanes, or 10 lanes. What we are doing is adding lanes of data. The data is still traveling at the same speed, and that's a very finite situation, but there's more bits of data arriving at the same time. So the roadway, the pathway has to get larger to carry the added information. Now, the frame you were just showing me there with the color depth.
That one there?
Can you bring that
There
up?
you go, I can. Yep. Look at that, push a button.
This, I love technology. This is what 10-bit does versus 8-bit. That top color, and hopefully you can see this on your mobile device, is much smoother in the gradations from one to another. If you look at the lower row, that's 8-bit. The color gradations are very defined. This is what the additional colors give you as a much smoother blend from one color to another for a more realistic picture.
Right.
That's the advantage, but there is a lot more data going down the roadway at any point in time.
Right. So with that, while Brent's talking about this and describing this, again, if you have any questions, definitely throw those questions up on the chat so we can go ahead and get to them. Even if you have questions that don't aren't maybe directly in correlation.
Yeah,
with what
don't
we're talking
hold them
about.
to the end.
Yeah, don't hold them to the end. Ask everything now. That way, when we get to a point where we can stop and answer some questions, we'll answer them. And even if it has nothing to do with what we're talking about, we're tech support. Let me switch over here. We're tech support. You can see we're in our area here where we're working. This is something that I'll switch over to this one here so you can see we're live in our lab. This is something that we are working
every day.
This is where we work. This is my desk is right over there. So we're tech support. Ask your questions.
And my chair to hover over him is right there.
Yeah, well, his office is in the other room. He just likes to spend time in here for some reason. Anyways, all that to say, ask your questions. We're tech support. We love answering questions. So even if it has nothing to do with HDMI, ask it. We want to help out. And we want to do things with that.
And as we continue forward in this, just so you guys know, he is a Control 4 programmer.
Right.
I'm a Crestron guy.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions referencing any of our products with those control systems,
right,
we are here to help you.
Exactly. So we're going to switch back over to this, but what we're going to look at next on our presentation is we're going to 2.1. So, and actually, I'm going to back up. In fact, I'm going to go back here. Where is it at?
There you go.
And there. So, pardon me. We're going to go back here. Yeah, we were here. And in fact, what I wanted to talk about is HDR.
Okay.
So in the 2.0 world, we had HDR. And with HDR, we have the capability of having some really dynamic color scenes or darkness scenes and whatnot. So we have a much, as you were talking about before, with the color of our shirts or the different grades of temperature of our shirts, we have the ability to break out the different portions to it. And so what HDR allowed people to do was to have much larger screens to be able to pick out all the differences on that screen and to have the different levels of light and dark to be able to pick up much better. Now, that's a lot of information. It's a lot of bits of information that has to go down there. So as we move into the 2.1 world, what we're going to see is an increase in bandwidth requirements. So with all of the information, everything else that we have going on, we have the additional information of course, 4 times the pixels again for information. We now increased our limit for HDMI 2.1 to 48 gigs. We're adding in some other pieces like dynamic HDR, eARC. We're also adding in, what else are we adding in, Brent?
We've got the eARC that you mentioned, the dynamic HDR, the ability to go to 12-bit. But the thing with every bit of this is you have to look at a balance. Just like with HDMI 2.0, do we go to 4K 60? If we go to 60 frames per second, we have to go down to 420 color.
Right.
But at 24 frames per second, we can go to 444 color.
Right.
However, if we go to 444 color, we're going to have to go backwards to 8-bit color. So there's a whole lot of balancing that goes on here. And he's got a really good graphic that's going to come up a little bit further on, talking about if you want to achieve everything in 8K that we can do in 4K, we're not at 48 gig.
Right. We're at 90.
We're at 96
gigs. Yes,
right.
Exactly.
So you have to balance things out. For example, right now, the best you're going to get out of a UHD Blu-ray player is 4K 60, 420, 10-bit color. And that is at 1796.
Right.
As soon as you go beyond that 420, we're closer to 24 or 32 gigabits. And that's just the way bandwidth works.
Yeah.
You have to, it's a compromise. If I want this, I have to give up some of that.
Well, and Brent, what's the movie, the one movie right now that's actually
Land's
out that has
Long Halftime Walk.
Yeah, Billy Land's Long Halftime Walk. This is the only movie right now that actually is.
To our knowledge, is 60 frames per second.
Right.
420 color. Now, it's very important to understand every Blu-ray UHD disc ever made is what color?
420.
Exactly.
Yes.
And why is that?
Because you don't have the space for it.
That's right.
Otherwise.
So anytime you put one of your devices at 422 or 444, you're actually having to apply guesswork.
Right.
And guesswork is not really good for color.
Right.
Now, some devices like Apple TV, for example, will not give you a 420 option.
Right.
So you're going to go to 422. In fact, they've eliminated 444 because of all the problems it caused.
Right.
Thankfully.
Yeah, thankfully they went ahead and did that. So with that, as we move into the 8K 2.1 world, like you were saying, we're going to be running into the same problem.
Right. So you're going to see resolution drop back down to 30 frames per second.
Right.
420 to give us 10-bit.
Right. And so that way you can actually get that image that your client, so the problem that the dealers and the installers are going to run into as you're talking with your clients are going to say, I want the best picture possible, and they're going to go onto the forums, they're going to go and do their own research, and that's fine. I'm happy for people to do their own research. However, what they're going to run into is they're going to say, I want 8K, 60 frames per second, I want 444, I want 12-bit.
Yeah.
Well, when you try and do that much data, and unfortunately I don't have the slide in here in this one, we missed that one slide. But with all that information, the amount of bandwidth that's required to do that is already above what HDMI 2.1 has set up for us to use in the new revision.
The original plan for 2.1 was not 8K.
Right.
It was to give us 4K, 120, 420, 12-bit color.
Right.
And the refresh rate they felt was more important for a more natural looking picture. And I agree with them. However, the refresh rate is not a sellable number to the public in general. 8K is.
Yeah.
So you're going to be walking a balance between resolution, refresh, color, and how much and how many pixels get color. Can you go to the frame that shows us the 444, 422?
Yeah, let's go ahead and go that there. We'll go here.
Now, this will give you a good idea of what's going on your television. Now, when you look at any screen, I don't care if it's 1080, 4K, or 8K, pixels are grouped in fours. How many of those pixels get individual color is what 420, 422, and 444 refer to. Now, you will see 6 graphics on here. The left graphics, which are grayscale, represent luminance for each pixel. And you've got a variety of stops, and HDR increases those for pixel luminance. The right side represents which pixels get color. Now, the UHD DVD specifications 420, which is the bottom one. What that means is each pixel in a group of 4 gets the same color information. However, each of those pixels gets separate luminance information. So the colors do look different, even though the color information is the same because of the brightness density. When you go up to 422, what you'll find is only 2 pixels in each group get an individual color. Still, each pixel gets individual brightness. At 444, all pixels get individual colors, all pixels get individual brightness. The advantage of that is you get more detail, more definition. The drawback to that is the roadway has to get bigger, 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 to the point of being out of frame to give you that much data. That's where it gets important. Now, as resolution increases, the ability for the human eye to discern these differences becomes greater.
Right.
And that's a problem. However, we're looking at the balance of bandwidth. So when they came out with the 8K standard, they dropped it to 420, so you could still get the 8K resolution and 10-bit color under 48.
Right.
That's why actually 4K at 444 will give you a better, more pleasing picture than 8K will, but good luck with your customers on that one.
Right.
And we all know there's plenty of consumer forums that tell you want, right now, 4K, 444, 10-bit, 60 frames per second, which is what bandwidth?
48?
23.
20, well, yeah, it's probably 24. Pardon me. You're right. Yeah, it's when you jump into 120 is when you get up to the 48. Anyways.
Yes.
So we have some questions.
Good.
So here's what we have. And I'm going to kind of do rapid fire with these guys. This is great, great stuff. Thank you for asking them. Please bring them on. What we have going on here. So Symphony Hi-Fi, keep your social distance. We're standing too close right now. Just
And I don't like you that much.
Well, you know. Let's see. Symphony Hi-Fi is asking, will it be able to handle the higher refresh rates, such as 100 or 144, for better gaming on the larger panels with 4K and 8K?
If at 4K, yes.
At 4K.
Now, one of the things that gaming does differently that's under 2.0 and 2.1 is the ability for variable refresh rate.
Right.
Which is an awesome feature built into gaming and the panels. Now, what this will allow you to do is if you have a fairly static image like the one behind me here, the refresh rate can be low because there's not much going on.
Nothing's changing.
But if you've got a battle scene, you're doing a multiplayer game with the battle scenes where there's a lot happening, refresh rate can go up, but color depth will go down.
Right.
So that's how they work that. So they're balancing between the two. So on a static screen, you can have a lot more color, but less refresh rate. On a high action screen, refresh rate goes up, color density goes down a little bit. There's no way around that.
Right.
You have to work that balance.
Yeah. So the answer for that is yes at 4K. And when you try to get up into the 8K world with that, no. Because, again, the refresh rate, what you're doing essentially is you're taking the amount of data. Let's say I've got this much data. And what I'm doing at this point, when I increase the refresh rate, let's say I'm doubling the refresh rate. Well, I have this much data that I have to then send in this much time. And so what's happening is I still have this much data, but I have to send it this quickly. So that's why the bandwidth increase is necessary for that. And unfortunately, we're just not going to get that right now. Yet. It's coming in a couple next revisions, 2.2, 2. Whatever, 3.
5.7.
Yeah, whatever we wind up with. So great question, by the way. Thank you for that. Yeah.
And that's right out of the gate, a good contender for a winner, so keep going.
Yeah. Richard Bond is asking, how soon is 8K TVs or broadcasting available? And I'm going to.
Well, the TVs are available now.
Yeah, TVs are available now. In fact, one thing that we had with our CES show, we were one of the first, if not the only.
True 8K generator on the floor.
Right. And so when, if you guys had a chance to check us out at CES, our booth, we had a Samsung 8K TV. And from our friends over at Meridio, they lent us an 8K, a true a true 8K generator that they had, and we used our new 48 gig fiber VLOX cable with it, which gave us a great picture.
Yes, and by the way, we do have a YouTube video on that already up on the site.
Yeah, so while you guys are on YouTube, check that out after this, of course.
It's Adam and I talking about it.
Yep, and yeah, check it out definitely. So yes, TVs are here. They're just, you're going to see more and more, just like with 4K. When 4K first came out, we had a couple TVs here, a couple TVs there, and then all of a sudden the floodgates opened. We had a bunch of TVs.
It will be a little bit for the content. I believe it will be streaming because we are now getting up to terabyte streamings around the country with some fiber.
Yeah.
So they'll be able to support 8K.
So Symphony, you did say that the Olympics are being shot in 8K. That's true. They are being shot in 8K. I don't know if they're going to be broadcasting them on standard cable. Well, I mean, obviously you won't be getting standard cable.
Well, right now the Olympics are on hold. However,
of course,
the plan was in I think 10 major metropolitan areas to do an over-the-air 8K broadcast with NHK coordinating it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely look into that and see. In fact, I'm going to look into it after this and do some more research on it. Maybe we'll make a post about it. All right. Rob, you have another good question. Oh, wait, pardon me. Rob, this is your first question. Will we have to switch to fiber with shorter HDMI lengths due to the increase in bandwidth?
Damn good question.
It is a very good question.
Boy, the questions are great today.
Aren't they? Yeah.
We used cables up to 3 meters at CES to come out of the generator into the system to run the fiber.
Correct.
So at this point, we know that our MHX and our VLOX will support 8K. We are in the process of testing longer links now. My feelings are if we get 5 meters out of copper, we're going to be doing good.
Right.
My preliminary feelings. This is unverified, and part of the reasons for this is there has not been a CTS released for cables yet.
Right.
And we've done a number of videos on this, but CTS is basically the testing standards for HDMI. And right now, there's not a testing standard to go to 8K for HDMI 2.1 for cables. Hardware there is.
Right. And that's a whole other topic that honestly we should probably get into.
There's a video on that one.
Yeah, there is actually, but I think we should do another video on it, honestly. If you guys think that's a good idea, give us a thumbs up, give us a comment about it, do all that kind of YouTube stuff. But one thing that Brent was talking about is at the CES show, we had our 100 meter cable at the show. The fiber cable, thank you. Now, we were really kind of trying to show off the 100 meters, really why that was the thing that we used there. The distances that we were going from where the TV was mounted to where the actual generator was well within a 2 meter HDMI length. So technically, it would have worked with a 2 meter cable. And in fact, I think we should test that. And,
well, we
and
did.
Make that, well, do it here.
Okay.
Do it here live. I think that'd be pretty cool. Anyways, all that to say, yeah. With that, so the answer is, yes, you'll have to switch to fiber in longer distances. Right now, we can say over 2 meters. We're hoping, like Brent said, to be able to get a little bit
to 4 or
longer
5.
than that. Yeah, 4 or 5. So right now, though, anything longer than 2, you will need to switch over to fiber. Okay. Oh, good question, Symphony. Why does it have to be HDMI? Why can't it just be fiber connections on both ends, and the panel would do all the deciphering of signal and data?
Security. Plain and simply security.
Yep. Yep.
As soon as you take the HDMI port out of the system, the security requirements that comes with the HDMI port are gone. It's that simple. It's not a technology requirement. It's not a bandwidth issue. It's plain and simply protection of content.
So,
lawyers.
Lewis, you had a great question. You had a question about your customer has an installed 2007 AudioQuest HDMI-X. I'm assuming the X would just mean a certain length. I would assume, anyways.
Yes.
But he's asking, what can be done to maximize its bandwidth without replacing?
Well, the X is the critical factor here. We have
I think I got one right here.
HDM-GA2, our Gigabit Accelerator 2nd edition, which will take you to 48 gig at, we know, 9 meters and some cables 10.
Yes.
I haven't tested the audio quest, so I don't know.
Yeah. So that's something that
But this is real and it's available now.
Yep, and it'll get you up to the 48 gigs if it's within that certain distance. Now, remember also the cable's got to be good quality. We've tested
Which I would assume the audio quest is.
Well, I would think so too. We'll need to make sure that, and this is just across the board, just explaining this to, you know, depending on what manufacturer you're using, it doesn't matter, but good quality cable. We've definitely tested it with ours. We know that we're able to get that speed at that distance. But if you're using it with someone else's, that's fine. We're happy to have you use this with someone else's cable.
We will not vouch for their distance.
We just can't say for sure that it's going to be able to go as far as ours. So test it, see if it works. If it works, fantastic. You don't have to replace a cable. You don't have to rip open a wall. But unfortunately, if it doesn't work.
Now, the HDMI GA2 does give you lots of flexibility. It allows you to adjust the equalization on the input of this to match the cable and on the output of this to match the television. For what's happening immediately, our HDMI GA1 will take you to 24 gigabits on an existing passive cable.
Right. So with that, let's see. All right. Are these limitations caused by copper HDMI? Can fiber optic be a potential solution for the future? Yes, it
Absolutely.
can. 100% it can. And in fact, if you go from here and go onto our own MetraHomeTheater.com website, you can actually go through our HDMI cables that we have available, and you'll see that we have copper cables that are available. We have fiber optic cables as well. I don't believe our new VLOX cable is on the website yet. That's still being finalized. We got artwork and all that kind of stuff that has to be done with it. But that is on its way, so definitely check that out.
We will cover a lot of this in next Wednesdays because we're going to discuss equalization curves and how that affects your product and the cable.
Right. So to answer all these questions, and man, some great questions. In fact, I'm going to keep refreshing this here to see if we got any more.
Can you go to the cable diagram?
I can, yes. So
because this is very critical to this.
Yep. So we'll switch over here and we'll go up to. Oh, we need to talk
We'll get
about
back to that one.
Yep, we need to talk about that one.
Okay, this diagram right here is very critical to what's happening and is going to happen in HDMI. The picture on the left that says 1.1 to 2.0 shows you 4 circles, red, green, blue, and clock.
Right.
Now, these are the actual video feed channels that the signal goes down in the HDMI cable. RGB, which is standard to the component guys, and then clock to reconnect all those together. Now, the big change between that and 2.1 is the clock channel is no longer a clock channel. Each of those individual runs is red, green, blue, and clock together on each individual grouping of cables, where in the past it was a solid color. How this will affect you in the cables is that 4th channel now needs to be the equivalent bandwidth of the other 3. A lot of them are not, because manufacturers knew the clock channel was very low bandwidth. All it had to do was tick, 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 and reconnect the RGB together. Well, that's changing. It now has to be equivalent channel. At least on all of our cables, EM, EP, EMP, EXS, all the cables we have sold through the years under the Ethereal brand are 4 equivalent channels. And I would love to claim I'm just that smart of a guy. I'm really not. We just built to the spec originally. Other people realized it wasn't checked and cheated.
Right.
I'm not that brilliant. I'd like to be.
Yeah. Anyways, moving on from that. Go ahead.
Can you go back to the HDR one?
I can,
The color squares.
Let's see. We'll go here and we'll go
there. There we go.
So
now this one he spent a fair amount of time on in the class. This is an excellent one.
Yeah. So this one here is really important for the information for the dynamic HDR. As we move into 2.1, one of the new features is dynamic HDR. Now, before we talk about that, we need to talk about what's on the left side of the screen here is the entire panel for standard HDR receives the same metadata for HDR. Now, I'm reading directly from that there. But what that means then is that as a new screen comes up on our
color for HDR.
Yep, as the color comes up for the panel for that one individual frame, you're getting one piece of information to go all the way across the entire panel. Now, what happens is when it's going across the entire panel, in a scene like, well, here, just switched. In a scene like this, what you're seeing is that this one scene has the same HDR data across the screen. So what's really important about this is as we move into the 2.1, what we have is dynamic HDR. What the difference is between those is we are going from an HDR, which is the entire panel, to a dynamic HDR, which is doing per pixel. So again,
what this means in the real world is an LED will become much closer to what we perceive OLED being today, because they can shut the light off to a given pixel area.
Right.
So that the blacks do become blacker. This also means OLEDs will become even more amazing.
Exactly. They're going to look amazing. So yeah, we love OLEDs around here. They're fantastic screens. But all that to say, again, when we're talking about the bandwidth requirements, I just to get that information across to everybody, when we're talking about the bandwidth requirements of 4K HDR, we're pushing 18 gigs, or the capabilities of 18 gigs. We could go higher than that. We could go to 24 gigs.
Assuming the cable.
Assuming the cable can handle it. Now, of course, HDMI 2.0 limits us to 18 gigs, so we're stopping there. But when we move into HDMI 2.1, we now are increasing that data exponentially, because we're not just doing HDR for the entire panel, we're doing per pixels. So that means literally that pixel there has a different color or HDR information than the pixel over here. And it's not just the panel itself getting one piece of information. So the amount of data that you're sending down this cable is just becoming astronomical. So as we get into that, again, I like to nerd out for certain things, like when we're talking about these things, because of the astronomical information that there is when it comes to that. However, when you're detailing this information to your clients, when you're talking to your clients about the fact that no, you're not going to get 8K, 60 frames per second, 444, 12-bit HDR plus, or HDR dynamic HDR,
or Dolby Vision,
you're just not going to get that much data down that cable.
Today.
Today. In the future, we're hoping to be able to get all that information down the line to it. So, very good information for that. Let's see if we have any more. Well, Dave, what does the eye pattern do that a lot of HDMI cable companies talk about?
Sadly, we don't have our overhead camera today.
I know, but you could draw it out.
Hopefully next week, and we'll get deeper into this. But when you look at an eye pattern,
I don't even have control over that one right now.
Yeah, hold on a second.
Oh boy, are you going to pull up the pictures of it? I don't think you're going to have time for
Here's
that.
what we're going to do. 1 and a 0.
Yeah.
We're doing this old school.
Yeah.
So data transitions from off to on, 1 to 0, low to high, yin yang, whatever you want to call it.
Watch this.
Now, as the bandwidth increases, as the resolution increases, that eye pattern gets smaller and smaller. There's a piece in the middle called a mask, and we're going to use my phone as a mask.
Yep.
So that's the mask. The data has to go over it and under it and never touch that mask. Now, when 1080p was the number, the mask was fairly large because the data was moving actually pretty darn slow. We didn't think so at the time.
Right.
But the mask has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller over time. So because there's not enough time for that transition, so the TV has to become much more biased and honestly bigoted in its ability to read data.
Yeah.
Before it would say, oh yeah, you're acceptable. The you're acceptable gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So the eye patterns become much more critical. Now the thing with eye patterns is, in the past we had 3 of them, a red, a green, and a blue. So all 3 eye patterns had to basically line up to each other in width and height. Now we've got even more because you have 4 high-speed channels, 8 equalization curves per cable by 4. So, and we'll get into that next week because that's a whole
I was going to say,
nother.
everything we're talking about right now.
This will be a lot we cover much more in depth next week, but eye patterns are super critical.
Yeah.
And the thing about eye patterns is everybody you look at shows you 1. That's like looking at 1 tire on your car and assuming the other 3 are of equal quality and value.
Right.
They may not be.
Right.
You bought 1 new tire and the other 3 are bald.
Yep, exactly.
So you've got to have 4 equivalent both in time, height, and phasing.
Got a couple more good questions.
Oh, awesome. Go for it.
This is great, guys.
tough.
Please keep them coming. We're loving the
Remember,
questions. Yeah,
Search
exactly.
protector's the
Best question we're going to give away.
This is getting tough.
Okay, so I like this one. This isn't so much a question as a speculation. Rob Lamberts is asking, realistically, when do you see 8K becoming the dominant resolution going forward? He's saying, pull out your wizard hats. He wants us to tell the future.
Well, when we look at 720/1080p, 3D, 4K, and 8K, each time the half-life gets shorter and shorter and shorter.
Right.
The time to transition from really 480i to 720p/1080p was 5 years.
Right.
That was a fairly slow transition. Component video came out. S-Video kind of fell to the side. Blu-ray players came out. It took a while. The 4K transition was about 3 years. The 3D came and went in 3 months, so it doesn't count. I think 8K, once we get our first 8K source streaming,
Yep.
it's gonna
Well, and that's
It's
what
gonna
happened.
fast.
That's what happened when we moved into 4K. We had Netflix that came out as one of the early adopters of an 8K
and then
signal.
Amazon, and that just pushed it to
and
the
just,
roof.
and then just completely went out from there.
It wasn't it wasn't this.
Yeah.
It was the streaming devices that pushed it up the roof.
Right, exactly. So as we get into the 8K, it's going to be one of those things that it'll come quickly. It's just once we get over the hump of actually getting the
Content.
ability of the content to be there, and of course the content itself. Once we get the content, then it'll actually be there. Now, of course, standard cable television right now still is at 1080i, which is nowhere near even 4K. So the ability
Canada,
for it.
Northeast,
Yep.
parts of Texas, Miami,
Yep.
are now doing 4K on cable. DirecTV,
DirecTV
Dish.
has had 4K for a while. Yep,
And
that's
Dish.
correct. And Dish. Yep.
and of course all the streaming, Netflix, Amazon, Vudu,
Yep. Yep. Hulu even has
Hulu
4K.
now?
Yep. Yep.
And
Pretty much
YouTube.
just about any streaming content now has 4K.
So we are not that far into the 4K. We're really not far into 4K, and it's all over the place.
yeah,
So
exactly. And we're
it's
going to
going
see
to happen
that.
fast as soon as content becomes available.
Right. We have, let's see. What does the iPattern do? We already talked about that. Oh, okay. The experts is asking, why doesn't HDMI come out with data down 2 cables? I have this answer. I know this one.
Okay.
Okay.
Which puts you ahead of me.
So why doesn't HDMI do 2 cables down the thing? Now, the answer to this is actually, we've done that in the past.
That's how it started.
And it wasn't so much that we had 2 HDMI cables. You'll remember, if you've been in the industry, if you've been buying from us for a while, our first HDMI extender was HDMI over 2 Category 5 cables.
Yes, it was.
And the problem with that is timing. So even if you have the same cable from the same company, it's the same model, same everything, same distance, it's been perfectly tested, the problem that you're going to run into is this cable is slightly over here, this same cable is slightly over here. We're going to get timing differences down that cable. That's the main reason why we are not seeing a dual cable design.
Now, and this, by the way, is not a new question. DVI-D,
right.
which is dual channel DVI, did that. That's why there's so many pins. And the original 18 gig HD base T prototype that we saw in ISE
Right.
4 years ago was in fact 2 transmitters, 2 receivers, all in single housings,
Right.
and 2 feeds. The drawback, as he mentioned, was the clock between the two. You had a visible line, either vertical or horizontal, between the 2 devices. There was no way to hide it.
Right.
So it's all got to be together. That's why the big change from 3 active video channels, red, green, blue, and then clock, to 4 RGB clock, RGB clock, RGB clock, RGB clock. And again, we'll get much deeper into that one on the next broadcast.
Yes, definitely. So let's see. In regards to the bandwidth requirements, this is from Ryan. Ryan says, in regards to the bandwidth requirements, are there any good solutions available for transmission of full 4K and beyond over a network for content distribution in business environments? I'll be perfectly honest with you, that's a
No.
little bit outside of our realm of products to begin with, but
Not really.
yeah, the difficulty is very straightforward. The best way that I have to describe this is your service into a standard residential home and even into a small business, let's say for your internet service. Let's say you get a gigabit service. Well, that's a gigabit service. It's just one single one. We're trying to send, even at 1080p, we're trying to send 5 gigabits of data down an HDMI cable. So as we move on, uncompressed, yes. As we move on into the higher bandwidth requirements of 4K even, when you're trying to send that over IP networks, it's possible you're going to run into a compression timing, which means that something's going to happen over here, and then it's going to happen over here later. It has to compile the data, send it across the network, and then decompile it and use it over on the other
And
side.
the big difference between doing it residentially and doing it like Amazon, Netflix, Vudu, and Hulu are doing, they have a much larger budget to do it than
Right.
you have it in the home.
Right.
And that's the key. They're not trying to do it with what is effectively an HD base T extender or IP extender. So they have a whole lot of money invested in those devices to do that residentially you really can't pull off.
That's right. Now, there are companies out there that are doing 4K over IP. Definitely worth looking into. Do some research on it. Thank you, Symphony. I see your comment about that. I can't talk about it on here because we're on the clock. So But with that, definitely do some research on it. There are some companies out there that are doing 4K. They may not be doing a full 18 gig 4K, or they may be doing a compressed 4K at the other end.
Realize that the best you're going to get uncompressed is 10 gigs just because of the network capability, the physical capabilities of the wire. And if you really want to do it right, there's some companies that are doing it through 10 gig switches.
Yes.
So there's fairly light compression on it.
Right.
But there's still compression.
Right. So great questions, guys. Thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate you checking in with us today.
And by the way, we're going to go through all these questions afterwards. We're going to pick a winner, and next week we'll announce who gets the HDMI surge protector. What time is this next Wednesday?
I would say the same time. Let's do 11 o'clock next Wednesday, guys. Or Eastern time anyways, 11 o'clock. You'll be able to find us here on this YouTube channel. So definitely give us a like, subscribe to us so you can get notifications about it.
Obviously, this is recorded. And if anybody wants it, we will make, after next week's broadcast, we will make the entire PowerPoint available to you guys.
Yeah.
Because there's a tremendous amount of information in there that we just can't get to.
Right.
It took him 4 hours to do this as a class.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So the PowerPoint that we used before is much, much larger. So you can definitely, if you want it, let us know. Send us a message or call up your rep and let them know that you're looking for it. If you have any more questions, feel free to contact us. And I'm trying to remember if I don't think I have the actual stuff for that. But my email is adamr@metrohometheater.com. Brent, of course, is Brent M at metrohometheater.com.
And your phone number is?
The best way to contact me is through our tech support line, which is 386-492-8584. And then, of course, Brent is open from
386-846-7264. I answer the phone from 8 a.m. typically till 10 p.m., 7 days a week. If you're working, we're working.
Exactly. And again, you can go onto our website, metrohometheater.com, and you can get all of that information on the website. You can get our contact information from the website as well. So definitely check in on it. If you come back to this video later on, I will have all this information in the description for the video, so you can get in contact with us that way. And come check us out next week. We'll be doing the same thing again Wednesday at 11, but more information. We'll get into some more deeper information. So
now, please look at our YouTube channel. There's a whole lot of great information up there. And if you have any questions or suggestions or ideas on how we can make this better,
right?
This is live, so let us know.
Yeah. Yeah, so definitely let us know how things went for you.
And did it sound okay?
Yeah, did it sound great? If you guys can hear us, make sure that's good. It sounds like they can hear us. I think we're doing okay there. But let us know how things went. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to contact us. You can even go back into the end of the chat and add more questions there if you want to. Yeah, Lewis, we'll see you next week. Thanks for the comments.
I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
Thank you.
We'll see you
then. Have a good day.